The rain beat hard against the window of the small apartment in Denver when Gabrielle Morrison felt her phone vibrate for the 10th time that night. She didn't need to look to know who it was. Her hands trembled as she held the cup of tea that had been cold for over an hour. The liquid swayed dangerously close to the edge, a reflection of the panic taking over every fiber of her body. 5 years. 5 years since she had managed to put Derek behind bars. 5 years rebuilding a life that he had destroyed piece by piece, night after night, punch after punch. And now, a week ago, she received the call that turned her world into a nightmare again. Derek had been released. A legal technicality, they said. Contaminated evidence, they said. As if that erased the scars that still marked her body and soul. As if that changed the fact that he almost killed her that rainy October night when she finally found the courage to say she was leaving. The message on the answering machine still echoed in her mind like a recurring nightmare. His voice. Too calm, too controlled, saying only 6 words that froze her blood. I'll find you, no matter where. Hello, this is Rachel Ashwood bringing you another narration. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel so this story reaches more people. Leave your like, share, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Remember that this is a narration, fictional content created for entertainment. Gabrielle had legally changed her name after the trial, from Gabrielle Foster to Gabrielle Morrison. Changed cities, jobs, lives. Cut the long blonde hair that Derek loved to pull during fights and dyed it dark brown. Started wearing glasses even though she didn't need them, just to change her appearance. Did therapy 3 times a week for 2 years until she could sleep through an entire night without waking up screaming. Worked hard to get the job at the small independent bookstore in downtown Denver, a quiet place where she could hide among shelves and old books, where nobody asked questions about her past. But Derek had always been good at finding things. Always been good at tracking, observing, waiting for the right moment. He had been a detective before everything fell apart, before his violent tendencies finally came to light in a way that not even his connections in the police department could cover up. He knew all the tricks, all the ways to disappear, and make other people disappear too. And now he was free, and she knew exactly what he wanted. Her, back, under his control. His property, as he used to say with that smile that made her stomach turn. The phone vibrated again. This time, Gabrielle looked. A message from an unknown number, just a photo. She felt bile rise in her throat. It was a photo of her, taken today, leaving the bookstore. The angle showed that whoever took it was across the street, watching, waiting. He was here, in Denver. He had found her. But what Derek didn't know was that Gabrielle was no longer the broken woman he left bleeding on the kitchen floor 5 years ago. The lights at the Lost Pages bookstore went out promptly at 9 at night, as always. Gabrielle locked the front door with hands that still trembled slightly, checked twice that it was really closed, and started walking quickly toward the bus stop. The October air in Denver was cutting, loaded with the promise of snow that hadn't arrived yet. The streets were emptier than normal for a Thursday night, and every shadow seemed to move with its own intention. Every sound of footsteps behind her made her heart race. She pressed her purse against her body, feeling the weight of the pepper spray she now carried religiously, and quickened her pace. The bus stop was only 2 blocks away, but it seemed miles distant. That's when she saw him. Derek was leaning against a light post, directly under the cone of yellow illumination, as if he wanted to make sure she would see him. He wasn't trying to hide. On the contrary, he was displaying his presence, savoring the fear he knew he was causing. He smiled when their eyes met. That smile. The same one he used before everything got worse, before the fists started flying. Gabrielle froze in the middle of the sidewalk, every instinct screaming contradictory directions. Run, scream, fight, faint. Her body couldn't decide which danger response to choose, so it simply stopped functioning. Derek started walking toward her, hands in the pockets of his dark coat, moving with that casual confidence of someone who knows they've already won. He wasn't in a hurry. He had all the time in the world. After all, where would she go? He always said that. Where will you run that I can't find you? The distance between them decreased with each second. 20 meters. 15. 10. Gabrielle's mouth was too dry to scream. Her legs finally received the command from her brain and she turned to run, but her feet got tangled and she stumbled, falling to her knees on the wet sidewalk. The pain was sharp, but the terror was greater. She heard his footsteps approaching, faster now, and closed her eyes, expecting to feel his hands on her shoulders, pulling her up, dragging her to some dark place where no one would hear her scream. But the touch never came. Instead, she heard a sound of impact, a grunt of surprise and pain, and then the noise of something heavy hitting metal. Gabrielle opened her eyes and turned her head quickly. Derek was on the ground, 3 meters away, holding his face while blood dripped between his fingers. Standing between her and her ex-husband was a man she had never seen before. Tall, probably over 6 feet, with broad shoulders under a black leather coat that seemed too expensive for that neighborhood. Dark hair combed back, jaw marked by a few days' stubble, and eyes that even in the poor streetlight seemed dark and dangerous. He said nothing, just stood there, a silent barrier between her and Derek, with fists still clenched at his sides. His posture was relaxed, but there was something in the way he positioned himself that made it clear he knew exactly how to use those fists, and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Derek got up staggering, wiping the blood from his broken nose with his coat sleeve. His eyes, previously confident and predatory, now showed something different. Caution. Maybe even fear. "You don't know who you're messing with," Derek spat, his voice coming out muffled because of his injured nose. The stranger tilted his head slightly, as if considering the words, and then spoke for the first time. His voice was low, controlled, with an accent that Gabrielle couldn't immediately identify, but that carried natural authority. "Actually, I know exactly who I'm messing with. Derek Foster, ex-detective, released last week on a technicality, currently violating a restraining order. The question is, do you know who you're messing with?" There was a moment of tense silence. Derek looked from the stranger to Gabrielle and back, calculating his options. She could see the gears turning in his head, that detective mind assessing the situation, looking for weaknesses, planning his next move. But something in the man's gaze made him reconsider. Derek took a step back, then another. "This isn't over," he said, pointing a bloody finger at Gabrielle. "You're mine, always were, always will be. Nobody can change that." And then he turned and disappeared into the darkness between the buildings, his footsteps echoing on the empty street until silence returned. Gabrielle was still on her knees on the sidewalk, shaking violently now that the adrenaline was starting to leave her system. The stranger turned to her and extended his hand. She looked at that hand for a long moment, her brain still trying to process what had just happened, before finally accepting it. He pulled her up easily, and she realized her legs could barely support her. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes quickly examining her scraped knees through her torn pants. Gabrielle shook her head, not trusting her voice to work properly. "I need to take you to a safe place. He'll come back, and next time I might not be around." That made something ignite in her brain, a spark of distrust cutting through the shock. "Who are you?" she managed to ask, her voice coming out weaker than intended. "How did you know my name? How did you know about Derek?" The man hesitated for a fraction of a second before responding. "My name is Lucio, and I know about you because I've been watching the bookstore for a few weeks." Gabrielle felt her stomach sink. Another stalker. Another obsessed man. She had jumped from the frying pan straight into the fire. She took a step back, searching for the pepper spray in her purse with trembling hands. Lucio noticed the movement and raised his hands in a placating gesture. "It's not what you're thinking. I wasn't watching you specifically. I was watching someone who frequents the bookstore. A man who owes money to very dangerous people. You just happened to be there, working. But in recent weeks, I noticed another man also watching. He was more obvious, more careless. He would stand across the street, always at the same times, always focused on you. I did some research, found out who he was, and why he was here. Gabriele processed this information, trying to decide if she believed him. Why would you care? Why help me? Lucio was silent for a moment, and something passed over his face, a shadow of old pain that disappeared so quickly she almost thought she imagined it. Because I've seen what men like him do, and because no one should have to live with that kind of fear. There was truth in his words. Gabriele could feel it. But there was also something more. Something he wasn't saying. Before she could question further, her phone vibrated again. Another message. Another photo. This time it was of Lucio, taken just a few minutes ago, when he was helping her stand up. The caption said only, "New boyfriend? He can't protect you. Nobody can." Gabriele showed the screen to Lucio and saw his jaw tighten. He's still around, watching. Lucio looked around the street, his eyes examining every shadow, every window, every parked car. "Come with me. Now. My car is a block away. I'll take you to a place where he can't reach you." Every survival instinct that Gabriele had developed over the last 5 years screamed at her not to trust strangers, not to get in cars with men she didn't know, not to put herself in vulnerable situations. But as she looked at the dark street, knowing that Derek was somewhere in the shadows, watching, waiting, planning, she realized she had only 2 options. Trust Lucio, or face Derek alone. And she already knew how facing Derek alone ended. Lucio's car was a discreet black sedan, the kind that didn't call attention, but that Gabriele suspected cost more than she made in a year. The interior smelled of leather, and something lightly woody, and was impeccably clean. He opened the passenger door for her, and waited until she was safely inside, before quickly circling the car and getting in on the driver's side. As soon as the doors closed, she heard the click of automatic locks, and a moment of panic went through her. Trapped. She was trapped in a car with a stranger. Lucio must have noticed her reaction, because he immediately said, "The locks are automatic. You can unlock them at any time. Look." He pointed to the button on her door. Gabriele tested it, and the door unlocked immediately. Something in her relaxed minimally. He started driving, navigating through Denver's streets with the familiarity of someone who knew the city well. They didn't speak for several minutes, the silence filled only by the soft sound of the engine and occasional traffic. Gabriele watched the streets pass by the window, trying to memorize the route in case she needed to escape later. They were heading toward the industrial part of the city, where warehouses and old factories dominated the landscape. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice cutting through the silence. "A safe place. It's not a house, not anything permanent. Just a place where you can stay tonight while I figure out what to do about your problem." "My problem has a name, Derek. And the police can't do anything because he technically hasn't done anything illegal yet. A restraining order is just a piece of paper, not for men like him." Lucio nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "I know. That's why you need a different kind of protection. The kind that the law can't provide." Gabriele turned to look at him directly. "And what kind of protection is that? Who exactly are you, Lucio?" He was silent for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, as he stopped the car in front of a 3-story brick building that looked like it had been a factory decades ago, he finally spoke. "I'm someone who operates outside conventional rules. Someone who can do things that the police can't or won't do. Someone who protects people when the system fails." Gabriele felt a chill run down her spine. "You're a criminal." It wasn't a question. Lucio turned off the engine and turned to face her, and for the first time she saw his eyes clearly under the light from the nearby post. They were dark brown, almost black, and carried the weight of someone who had seen and done things that most people couldn't even imagine. I'm someone who understands that the world isn't black and white, that sometimes justice needs to be served outside a courtroom, that people like Derek Foster can manipulate the system because they know its loopholes, and that people like you get stuck in the middle, without real protection. He paused, then added more softly, I run a private security operation. We protect people that the system has failed. Yes, some of the methods aren't exactly legal. And yes, the money that finances this comes from activities that the law wouldn't approve of. But the people I protect are alive and safe, which is more than the system can say. Gabrielle should be terrified, should open the door and run. But instead she found herself asking the question that really mattered. And what do you want in return? Lucio held her gaze for a long moment before responding. Nothing you're not willing to give. I'm not Derek. I won't force you into anything. But I need you to trust me long enough for me to keep you safe and deal with him permanently. Deal with him permanently. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Gabrielle wasn't sure she wanted to examine too closely. Are you going to kill him? She asked, surprised at how calm her voice sounded. Lucio shook his head. Not unless it's absolutely necessary. There are other ways to neutralize a threat. Ways that don't leave you with blood on your hands, even indirectly. Gabrielle looked at the building ahead of them, then back at Lucio. Every choice she had made in the last 5 years had been about survival, about rebuilding, about trying to be normal again. But normal wasn't working. Normal left her vulnerable. Normal meant that Derek could just come back and destroy everything she had built. Maybe it was time to stop trying to be normal and start really fighting. Okay, she finally said. I trust you. For now. But would this trust cost more than she could pay? The interior of the building was surprisingly well maintained considering its weathered external appearance. Lucio guided her through a corridor lit by fluorescent lights to a freight elevator that creaked worryingly as it rose to the 3rd floor. When the doors opened, Gabrielle found herself in a large, open space that had been converted into something between an office and an apartment. There was a living area with leather sofas, a small but modern kitchen in one corner, and several doors that presumably led to other rooms. But what most caught her attention were the computer screens covering an entire wall, showing security camera feeds from various locations around the city. 3 people were working at computer stations, and all looked up when Lucio and Gabrielle entered. A man about 40 years old with graying hair and thick-framed glasses was the first to speak. You brought her. Good. The ex-husband is moving. We tracked his phone to a cheap motel on Colfax Avenue. He rented a room for a week. A young woman with short pink hair and multiple piercings added, I also hacked his computer. He has files on Gabrielle, photos, old addresses, financial records. He's obsessed, boss. Gabrielle felt nausea rise in her throat. He has photos of me? From when? The woman clicked a few keys and turned one of the monitors so Gabrielle could see. The screen showed folder after folder of images. Some were old, from when they were still married, but others were recent. Very recent. Photos of her leaving her apartment, buying groceries, sitting in the bookstore window reading during her break. There were hundreds of them. He's been following you for at least 3 months, Lucio said calmly, but Gabrielle could hear the contained anger in his voice. Probably since before he was released. Someone was doing this for him while he was still in prison. 3 months. Derek had invaded her life again 3 months ago, and she didn't even know. All those times she felt like she was being watched. All those moments of paranoia that she dismissed as residual trauma were real. He was there, in the shadows, watching, planning, waiting. I'm going to be sick, she managed to say before running to what she hoped was a bathroom. Lucio quickly guided her to a door, and she barely managed to close it behind her before falling to her knees in front of the toilet. When she finally emerged 10 minutes later, pale and shaking, Lucio was waiting outside with a glass of water. She accepted gratefully, rinsing her mouth before drinking small sips. "Sorry," she murmured. "You don't need to apologize. You're processing traumatic information. It's a normal reaction." He guided her to one of the sofas, and she sat heavily, feeling as if all her strength had been drained. The woman with pink hair brought a blanket and gently placed it over Gabrielle's shoulders. "I'm Maya," she said with a gentle smile. "Tech specialist of this operation. If it has a computer, phone, or camera involved, I can hack it." The older man approached too. "James, research and intelligence. If we need to know something about someone, I find out." The third team member, a young, muscular man with tattoos covering his arms, waved from his station. "Ryan, physical security. Basically, I break things and people when necessary." Gabrielle looked at the three, then at Lucio. "Do you do this often? Protect people?" Lucio nodded. "More than you imagine. The justice system fails many people. Victims of domestic abuse, threatened witnesses, people stalked by stalkers that the police don't take seriously until it's too late. We fill the gaps. And how do you sustain yourselves? This can't be cheap." There was an exchange of glances between the team members before Lucio responded. "I have other businesses, some legal, some not so much. But the money I earn goes to finance operations like this. Consider it my form of compensation." "Compensation for what?" Gabrielle wanted to ask, but something in his expression made her keep the question to herself. Everyone had their demons, their reasons for choosing the path they chose. Maybe one day he would tell her, or maybe some secrets were better left buried. Maya returned to her station and started typing furiously. "Okay, here's what I found out. Derek has been using credit cards in his own name, which is stupid, but works in our favor. He bought a gun yesterday at a store that doesn't do proper background checks. He also bought ropes, duct tape, and a plastic tarp." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Gabrielle felt her blood freeze in her veins. "He's planning to kidnap me. Or worse." Lucio knelt in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "He won't get near you, I promise, but we need to be proactive. We can't just wait for him to make a move. We need to make ours first." "What are you suggesting?" "Let me deal with him. My way. You don't need to know the details. Just trust that when I'm done, Derek Foster will no longer be a threat to you or anyone else." Gabrielle looked at this man she had met less than an hour ago, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and offered protection when she needed it most. She should be terrified, should be calling the police. But instead, she found herself nodding. "Do what's necessary. Just make sure he can never hurt me again." Lucio held her hand, and the touch was surprisingly gentle, coming from someone who was clearly capable of great violence. "You have my word." But words, Gabrielle was learning, were easy to give and hard to keep. The following hours passed in a haze of planning and preparation. Gabrielle watched from her place on the sofa while Lucio's team worked with military efficiency, tracking Derek's every move, mapping his patterns, identifying vulnerabilities. It was fascinating and terrifying at the same time, seeing how easily they could invade someone's life, discover their secrets, predict their next steps. If they could do this with Derek, what stopped them from doing the same with her? As if reading her thoughts, Lucio sat beside her on the sofa, maintaining a respectful distance. "You're wondering if you can trust us? If we did research on you too?" Gabrielle didn't deny it. "We did," he admitted. "We needed to know who you were, if your story was true. If Derek was really a threat or just an inconvenient ex-boyfriend. What we discovered convinced us that you needed help. Hospital records from 5 years ago showing multiple fractures, bruises, a concussion. Police reports that you filed, and that were archived because Derek had friends in the department. Testimonies from neighbors who heard screams but were afraid to intervene. You suffered, Gabrielle, more than anyone should. Hearing all this exposed so clinically should have made her feel violated, but instead, she felt something different. Validation. Someone finally believed her, saw the complete truth of what she had been through. And now that you know everything about me, what happens next? After Derek is no longer a threat? Lucio was silent for a moment, considering his response. That depends on you. You can go back to your life, to your apartment, and your job at the bookstore, and never hear from us again. Or, if you want, there's a place for you here. Not many people understand what it's like to live with constant fear, look over your shoulder every moment, question every shadow. But all of us here understand. We all have our reasons for being in this work. Gabrielle looked around the room, observing Maya focused on her screens, James making calls in a low voice, Ryan checking equipment in a corner. They seemed like a family, in a strange and dysfunctional way, united not by blood, but by shared trauma and a desire to protect others from going through what they went through. I don't know how to fight, she said softly. I don't know how to hack computers or do research or anything useful. You know how to survive, Lucio responded, and that's the most valuable skill of all. Everything else can be taught. Before Gabrielle could respond, Maya called from her station. Boss, we have movement. Derek just left the motel. He's driving toward Gabrielle's apartment. The climate in the room changed instantly. Ryan grabbed a coat and checked something at his waist that Gabrielle suspected was a gun. James started tracking Derek's movement on a digital map. Lucio stood up, his posture shifting from relaxed to alert in a second. How long until he gets there? 15 minutes with current traffic, Maya responded. Lucio turned to Gabrielle. He'll discover you're not there. He'll be furious. Men like Derek don't handle well when they lose control of the situation. He'll do something reckless. And when he does, we'll be waiting. Are you going to hurt him? Gabrielle asked, not being sure how she felt about the answer. Only if necessary. The goal is to neutralize the threat, not create a martyr. There are more effective ways to deal with people like Derek. Gabrielle wanted to ask what ways those were, but part of her didn't want to know. Plausible deniability, she thought. If she didn't know exactly what they were going to do, she couldn't be held accountable. Was it cowardly? Probably. But she was tired of being brave, tired of fighting, tired of living in fear. If Lucio and his team could take that burden from her, even by questionable methods, she was willing to let them try. Ryan and Lucio headed to the elevator, but before entering, Lucio looked back. Stay here. Maya and James will keep you safe. I'll be back in a few hours. And then they were gone, and Gabrielle was alone with two strangers in a converted warehouse, waiting to discover the fate of the man who had made her life hell. The next hours were the longest of Gabrielle's life. Maya kept one of the monitors tuned to security camera feeds near Gabrielle's apartment, and they watched as Derek arrived, parked his car on the street, and approached the front door of the building. He didn't try to be subtle. He simply forced the lock on the main door and climbed the stairs to her apartment on the second floor. He's inside, Maya narrated unnecessarily, since everyone could see Derek breaking down Gabrielle's apartment door with a violent kick. Gabrielle watched, horrified and strangely fascinated, as Derek ransacked her apartment. He threw things, broke objects, clearly getting more furious with each moment that passed without finding her. He grabbed a framed photo of her with her mother that was on the bedside table and smashed it against the wall. Tore clothes from the closet, flipped the mattress. It was a violation, seeing her private space being destroyed, but it was also liberating in a strange way. Let him destroy everything, she thought. They were just things. She was safe, and that was all that mattered. After 20 minutes of destruction, Derek finally stopped in the middle of the living room, panting, surrounded by the debris of the life Gabrielle had built. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Gabrielle's phone, which was on the table next to her, started vibrating. She looked at Maya, who nodded. "Answer it. Let him talk. We're recording everything." With trembling hands, Gabrielle answered. "Where are you?" Derek's voice was low, dangerous, the kind of calm that always came before the storm. "Far from you," Gabrielle responded, surprised at the firmness in her own voice. "You can't hide from me. I always find you. You know that. Maybe I'm tired of hiding. Maybe it's time for you to stop chasing me and move on with your life." Derek laughed, but there was no humor in that sound. "Move on? You are my life. You always were. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were mine, and nobody takes what's mine. I'm not your property, Derek. I never was. You hurt me, broke me, almost killed me. But I survived. I rebuilt. And I won't let you destroy that again." There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. Then, "You have someone helping you. That man from the street. Who is he?" "Someone who's not afraid of you." "He should be. Because I'm going to find him. And I'm going to make him wish he never laid hands on me. And then I'm going to find you. And when I do, Gabrielle, you're going to beg for what I did before to seem merciful." The call was cut off. Gabrielle realized she was shaking, but not from fear. It was anger. Pure, burning anger for all the years she spent afraid, all the nightmares, all the times she looked over her shoulder expecting to see him there. "Where are Lucio and Ryan?" she asked. Maya checked another monitor. "Arriving at Derek's motel now. Going to make a little visit to his room while he's busy destroying your apartment." Gabrielle watched on a split screen as Lucio and Ryan entered Derek's motel room with the ease of professionals. They wore gloves and moved quickly, methodically. Ryan installed small devices that Gabrielle assumed were cameras and microphones. Lucio photographed everything in the room. The map spread on the bed showing the location of Gabrielle's apartment and the bookstore, the photos covering an entire wall, the gun and the other items Derek had purchased. "Evidence," James explained, seeing the confusion on Gabrielle's face. "Even if the police didn't do anything before, this is enough for a clear violation of the restraining order, trespassing, and possible kidnapping planning. We'll make sure this evidence reaches the right people. But Derek has connections in the police. He said they wouldn't do anything." James smiled, and there was something slightly sinister in that expression. "He has connections in the Denver Police Department. But the FBI doesn't care about local politics. And when they receive an anonymous package showing an ex-cop planning kidnapping and possible homicide, they'll investigate. Especially when they discover that Derek has been doing this with other women too." Gabrielle blinked. "Other women?" "You weren't the first, Gabrielle. Just the first who managed to escape and put him in prison. We found records of at least 3 other women who filed complaints against him over the years. All withdrew the complaints afterward. All disappeared or moved far away. One is dead, officially listed as suicide, but the circumstances are suspicious." The nausea returned. Gabrielle had spent 5 years blaming herself, wondering if she had provoked somehow, if she could have done something different. But Derek was a predator. She was just his most recent victim in a long line of them. "He needs to be stopped," she said with conviction. "Permanently." "And he will be," James assured. "Lucio has a plan. Just trust the process." But trusting was hard when her future was in the hands of people she barely knew. Lucio and Ryan returned 2 hours later, bringing with them an energy of mission accomplished. Lucio went straight to Gabrielle, examining her face as if looking for signs of distress. "Are you okay?" Maya said Derek called. Gabrielle nodded. "He made threats, the usual ones. But I'm fine. What happens now? Lucio sat beside her, and this time he didn't maintain distance. He was close enough for her to feel the warmth of his body, smell the light scent of leather and something woody that seemed to be him. It was strangely comforting. Now we wait. The FBI will receive the evidence package tomorrow morning. Until then, Derek will probably try to find you again. He'll go back to the bookstore. He'll watch your apartment. He'll check all the places he knows you frequent. But you won't be in any of them. You'll stay here, where he can't reach you. For how long? As long as necessary. Days, weeks. We have resources to keep you comfortable and safe. Gabrielle looked around the open space. I can't just disappear. I have a job, responsibilities. We already took care of that, Maya intervened. I called the bookstore saying you had a family emergency and need a few days off. Your boss was very understanding. They had thought of everything. It was impressive and slightly scary how efficiently they could reorganize someone's life. But Gabrielle was too tired to question, too tired to fight. For the first time in 5 years, she allowed herself to relax, just a little, knowing that someone was taking care of her. There's a room in the back, Lucio said, pointing to one of the doors. It's not much, but it has a comfortable bed and a private bathroom. You must be exhausted. Rest a bit. I'll wake you if there's any development. Gabrielle wanted to argue, wanted to stay awake and monitor the situation, but her body had other ideas. The adrenaline that kept her functioning was finally running out, leaving her completely exhausted. She nodded and stood up, swaying slightly. Lucio held her by the elbow, stabilizing her. Thank you, she murmured. For everything. I know you didn't have to do any of this. Yes, I did, he responded softly. Because nobody else would, and you deserve to be protected. There was something in his eyes when he said that, an intensity that made Gabrielle's heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. She pulled away quickly, confused by her own reaction, and headed to the room. The door closed behind her, and she finally allowed the tears she was holding back to fall. She cried for everything she had lost, for all the years stolen by fear, for having to depend on strangers because the system that should protect her had failed. But she also cried with relief, because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. On the other side of the door, Lucio remained standing for a long moment, listening to the muffled sounds of crying. Each sob was like a knife in his chest, bringing memories he had tried to bury long ago. Memories of another woman, another time, another failure. He hadn't been able to save his sister from a man like Derek, but he would save Gabrielle, even if it cost everything. Gabrielle woke up disoriented, not knowing where she was for a moment of panic, before the memories from the previous night returned. The room was dark, except for a thin line of light under the door. She checked her phone, which Maya had assured was being tracked and protected. 6 a.m. She had slept for almost 8 hours, the deepest sleep she'd had in weeks. There was a soft knock on the door. Gabrielle, are you awake? It was Lucio's voice. Yes, you can come in. The door opened, and Lucio entered carrying a tray with coffee, toast, and fruit. Thought you might be hungry. It's not much, but it's what we have here. Gabrielle sat up in bed, pulling the blanket around her, suddenly conscious that she was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, now wrinkled and stained. You didn't need to do this. I know, but I wanted to. He placed the tray on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. We have news. The FBI received the package. They've already sent agents to locate Derek, but there's a problem. Of course there was. When wasn't there? Derek disappeared. He didn't return to the motel last night. Didn't use credit cards. Didn't make calls. He knows he's being hunted and went into survival mode. The fear that Gabrielle had managed to suppress returned with full force. So he's still out there, still looking for me. Yes, but now he's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. We'll find him, Gabriele. It's just a matter of time. Time. How long would she have to live like this? Hidden, waiting for the nightmare to end. Days? Weeks? Months? I can't live in a box forever, she said, hating how her voice sounded small and defeated. Lucio moved closer, and this time when he took her hand, she didn't pull away. You won't have to, I promise. We'll end this, and you'll be able to go back to your life, a real life, without fear, without looking over your shoulder. How can you promise that? You don't know Derek. He's patient, meticulous. He'll wait months, years if necessary. And then, when I finally let my guard down, he'll attack. Lucio squeezed her hand, and there was something fierce in his eyes. Because I'm more patient, more meticulous, and much more dangerous than Derek Foster ever dreamed of being. And unlike him, I have resources he can't even imagine. Gabriele wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to. But trust was something Derek had broken in her so completely that she didn't know if she could rebuild it. As if sensing her hesitation, Lucio continued. Let me tell you a story. 5 years ago, my younger sister, Sophia, was in a relationship with a man named Marcus. He was charming, successful, everything my family thought she deserved. But behind closed doors, he was a monster. He beat her, controlled her, isolated her from everyone who loved her. She tried to leave several times, but he always found her. Always convinced her to come back with promises of change that never materialized. Lucio paused, and Gabriele could see the old pain on his face. One night, Sophia finally found the courage to really leave. She came to me, told me everything, begged me for help. I said I would take care of it, that I would talk to Marcus, that I would make sure he never hurt her again. But I did it through legal channels. I went to the police, got a restraining order, did everything right. And it didn't work, Gabriele said softly, already knowing the end of the story. Lucio shook his head. Marcus violated the restraining order 3 days later. He broke into her apartment while I was at work. When I arrived, it was too late. She was dead. He strangled her and then killed himself. The police said there was nothing they could have done, that restraining orders are just paper, that they can't protect anyone from someone truly determined. Tears glistened in his eyes now, and Gabriele felt her heart break for this man who had lost so much. That's when I realized the system is broken, that following the rules only works when both sides follow the rules, and men like Marcus, like Derek, don't follow rules. So I decided I wouldn't follow them either. I started this operation in memory of Sophia. Every person I protect is a chance to do right what I did wrong with her. Gabriele squeezed his hand back, finally understanding. You're trying to save her by saving other people. Maybe. Or maybe I just learned that sometimes justice needs to come from outside the system. Either way, I won't fail you like I failed her. That I promise. And in that moment, Gabriele believed him. Not because he was perfect or because he had all the answers, but because he understood. He knew what it was like to lose someone to violence, to live with the guilt of not having done enough. They were damaged souls trying to find redemption in a world that rarely offered second chances. So, what do we do now? She asked. Now, we draw him out of hiding, and when he appears, we'll be ready. But drawing Derek out meant using Gabriele as bait, and they both knew how dangerous that would be. Hello. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to check out the Dangerous Obsession ebook collection, a collection with engaging adult stories. The link is pinned in the comments and in the QR code on the screen. The plan was risky, bordering on suicidal, but Gabriele agreed because she saw no other option. They would use the bookstore's security cameras to monitor when Derek appeared, because he would inevitably appear. Men like him couldn't resist returning to places they associated with their victims. It was part of the obsession, part of the control. Maya would hack the bookstore's security system to give them access to live feeds. Ryan and 2 more men from Lucio's team would be positioned inside and around the store, disguised as customers and workers. And Gabriele, against all her survival instincts, would return to work as if nothing had happened. "You won't be alone for even a second," Lucio assured for the 10th time as they prepared. "I'll be there too, disguised. If Derek shows up, if he even tries to approach you, we'll get him. And if he doesn't show up, if he realizes it's a trap, then we try something else. But men like Derek can't stay away. Obsession is stronger than caution. He'll show up." Gabriele wanted to believe that, but fear was a living thing in her chest, writhing and growing with each passing minute. She hadn't been near Derek in 5 years, and the idea of seeing him again, even in controlled circumstances, made her skin crawl. But she was tired of running, tired of hiding. If this was what needed to be done to end this once and for all, then she would do it. They arrived at the bookstore an hour before opening. The owner, Mr. Patterson, a kind man in his 60s who had always treated Gabriele with kindness, was waiting. Lucio had explained the situation to him, leaving out the more sordid details of his own operation, and Mr. Patterson had immediately agreed to help. "Nobody hurts my employees," he said, with a ferocity surprising for a man who spent his days among books and tea. "Use my store as you need to catch that monster." The morning passed slowly. Customers came and went, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. Gabriele attended to each one with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her hands trembling slightly whenever the doorbell rang. Lucio was disguised as a customer, pretending to browse the history section while keeping Gabriele in his line of sight at all times. Ryan was outside, disguised as a construction worker on a fictional project across the street. 2 other men were positioned at strategic points around the block. Noon came and passed. Then 1 o'clock. 2. Gabriele was starting to think that Derek wouldn't show up, that he was smarter than they thought, when the doorbell rang and she looked up. Her blood froze. Derek was standing in the entrance, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made every survival instinct scream for her to run. He looked worse than when she saw him on the street. His nose was still swollen from where Lucio had hit him, and there was a wildness in his eyes that wasn't there before. He was falling apart, losing the careful control he always maintained in public. And that made him infinitely more dangerous. Gabriele felt her body freeze, unable to move, unable to breathe. Derek started walking toward the counter where she was, his hands in his pockets, a small disturbing smile on his face. "Hello, Gabriele. I missed you." From the corner of her eye, she saw Lucio move, positioning himself, saw Ryan enter through the front door, blocking the exit. The other customers in the store, only 3 at that moment, started to notice something was wrong. "Derek, you need to leave," Gabriele managed to say, her voice firmer than she felt. "There's a restraining order. You can't be here. Restraining orders are just paper, baby. You should know that by now. There's nothing that can keep me away from you. We belong to each other. We always have." He was only 3 meters from the counter now. 2 meters. Gabriele could see the madness in his eyes, the obsession that had consumed any rationality he ever had. "You're going to come with me now," Derek said, his voice low but loaded with threat. "Voluntarily or not, you're coming, and we're going to have a long conversation about loyalty and respect." He extended his hand toward her, and that's when Lucio moved. In 3 quick steps, he was between Derek and Gabriele, and this time Derek recognized him. "You!" Derek spat. "I should have figured. Who do you think you are, interfering in family matters? She's not your family. She's your victim, and this ends now." Derek laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "You think you can stop me? You don't know who I am, what I'm capable of." "Actually, I know exactly. Derek Foster, 37 years old, ex-detective fired for misconduct. currently wanted by the FBI for violation of restraining order, trespassing, and suspected kidnapping planning. Want me to continue? The color drained from Derek's face. You can't prove anything. I don't need to. The FBI already has all the proof they need. Your motel room was very revealing. The photos, the maps, the gun, the materials you bought, everything documented, everything photographed, everything delivered to the appropriate authorities. It's over, Derek. You lost. For a moment, Gabrielle thought Derek would crumble, accept defeat. But then, she saw something change in his eyes, a decision being made. If he couldn't have her, nobody could. Derek pulled something from his pocket, and it took a second for Gabrielle to register what it was. A knife. He had a knife, and he was moving toward her with surprising speed, pushing Lucio aside. Gabrielle screamed, stumbling backward, but there was nowhere to go. The counter was behind her, trapping her. Derek was only a meter away, the knife raised, when Ryan hit him from behind. The two men fell to the floor in a tangle of limbs. The knife slid across the wooden floor, stopping at Gabrielle's feet. She kicked it away, her heart beating so hard she thought it would explode. Lucio was beside her in an instant, checking if she was hurt, while Ryan struggled to subdue Derek. But Derek was fighting with the strength of a man who had nothing left to lose. He managed to break free, hitting Ryan in the face with enough force to momentarily stun him. Then Derek was on his feet again, looking for the knife, his eyes wild. The other two men from Lucio's team came running through the back door, but Derek saw them coming. He grabbed the knife from the floor and, instead of attacking Gabrielle again, did something nobody expected. He turned it on himself, pressing the blade against his own throat. "Nobody moves," he shouted, "or I do this, and then you'll all have to explain how you let a man kill himself right in front of you." Lucio raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Derek, don't do this. It's not worth it. You can still get out of this. Get help." "Help?" Derek laughed bitterly. "There's no help for me. There's nothing without her. You don't understand. Gabrielle is everything. Without her, I'm nothing." "Then let her go," Lucio said calmly. "If you really love her, let her be happy. Let her live her life." "No!" Derek shouted, and Gabrielle saw a drop of blood appear where the knife pressed his skin. "If I can't have her, I'll make sure she's never happy. She'll live the rest of her life knowing she killed me, that her selfishness drove me to this." Gabrielle felt something break inside her. Not fear, not anymore. Anger. Pure, burning anger for this man who had stolen so much from her and now wanted to steal even more, even in his death. "You're not putting this on me," she said, her voice cutting through the tense air. "I didn't kill you. You did this to yourself. Your choices, your actions, your sick obsession. I'm not responsible for you, Derek. I never was. And if you want to kill yourself, then do it. But don't expect me to carry that guilt. I've carried enough weight for you." The silence that followed was absolute. Derek looked at her, and for the first time, Gabrielle saw something beyond obsession in his eyes. Confusion, hurt. As if he was finally realizing that she really didn't love him, never loved him, and that all the control he thought he had over her was an illusion. The knife trembled in his hand. For a moment, Gabrielle thought he really would do it, really would cut his own throat right there. But then the sound of sirens filled the air. Someone had called the police. Derek heard it too, and the reality of the situation finally seemed to penetrate. He was surrounded, no way out, no options. Slowly, very slowly, he lowered the knife. Ryan moved quickly, kicking the weapon away and immobilizing Derek on the floor, this time with his knee firmly pressed between his shoulder blades. The police entered moments later, followed by FBI agents who apparently had been alerted by Maya. They took custody of Derek, reading his rights as they handcuffed him. Derek didn't resist. All the fight had left him, leaving only a broken and empty man. As they led him outside, he looked at Gabriele one last time. "I loved you," he said, and there was something pathetically sincere in his voice. "I know you don't believe it, but I loved you." Gabriele met his eyes and said the truth she had kept for 5 years. "That wasn't love, Derek. It was obsession. It was control. It was abuse. And I deserve better than anything you could have given me." And then he was gone, taken to a police car, and Gabriele finally allowed her legs to give out. Lucio caught her before she fell, holding her against his chest as she trembled with the release of 5 years of fear and tension. "It's over," he murmured in her hair. "Really over. You're safe now." And for the first time in a long time, Gabriele believed it. The following weeks were a blur of police statements, meetings with prosecutors, and therapy sessions that Lucio insisted she do. Derek was formally charged with multiple crimes, including violation of restraining order, trespassing, assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted kidnapping. With the evidence that Lucio's team had collected, plus the witnesses from the bookstore, there was no chance of him escaping this time. His lawyer was trying to plead temporary insanity, but the prosecutors were confident they would get a conviction that would keep him locked up for a long time. Gabriele should be relieved, and in many ways she was. But she also felt strangely empty, as if the last 5 years of her life had been defined by Derek and her fear of him. And now that he was gone, she didn't know who she was without it. It was Lucio who helped her navigate these confusing feelings. He would show up at her apartment, which had been cleaned and repaired by his team, with food when she forgot to eat. He would sit with her during the nightmares that still came, though less frequently now. He never pressured, never demanded anything, just was there, a constant and comforting presence. And slowly, very slowly, Gabriele started to realize that what she felt for Lucio was different from anything she had felt before. It wasn't the intense and suffocating passion that Derek had confused with love. It was something calmer, deeper. It was trust. It was respect. It was the feeling that she could be completely herself, with all her flaws and fears and scars, and he would still see her as someone worth protecting. One night, 3 months after the incident at the bookstore, Lucio showed up at her door with a bottle of wine and a nervous expression she had never seen on him before. "Can I come in?" he asked, and there was something different in his voice. Gabriele opened the door wider, allowing him to pass. They sat on the sofa, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Lucio broke the silence. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Gabriele felt her stomach tighten. "Okay. When I met you, when I decided to help you, I told myself it was just another case. Another person who needed protection. But I was lying. From the moment I saw you on that street, with Derek approaching and terror in your eyes, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Something I swore I'd never feel again after losing Sophia." He paused, gathering courage. "I fell in love with you, Gabriele. Not in the obsessive and sick way that Derek called love, but truly. I fell in love with your strength, with the way you survived something that would have broken most people. With your kindness, even after everything you went through. With the way you read old books during your break and always have a perfect recommendation for every customer who enters the bookstore." Gabriele felt tears burn her eyes. "Lucio, let me finish," he said gently. "I know you've been through a lot. I know the last thing you probably want is another man in your life, especially one like me, who lives in the kind of world I live in. I don't expect anything from you, but I needed you to know. I needed to be honest about my feelings, because you deserve honesty. You deserve someone who sees you for what you really are, not for what they want you to be." Gabriele looked at this man who had entered her life as a savior and become so much more. She thought about all the times he was there, all the small and large ways he showed he cared. and she realized she had fallen in love too, so gradually that she didn't even notice it happening until it was too late. "I fell in love with you too," she said softly, and saw his eyes widen with surprise. I didn't know if it was real or just gratitude or Stockholm Syndrome or anything else my therapist suggested. But it's real. You made me feel safe for the first time in years. You saw me at my worst moment and didn't run away. You treated me like a person, not like a victim or a project. And yes, you scare me a little, because the world you live in is dangerous, and I don't know if I'm ready for that. But you also make me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Lucio took her hand, intertwining their fingers. I won't rush you. We can go slow, at your pace. And if you decide it's too much, that you just want to move on with your life without me, I'll understand. Your happiness is more important than my feelings. Gabriele smiled through the tears. How about we start with dinner? A real dinner. Not just you showing up with food because I forgot to eat. A proper date. Lucio smiled, and it was the first time she saw him really smile. Not just a small movement of lips, but a genuine smile that lit up his entire face. I would love that. They leaned together, and when their lips touched, it was gentle and sweet, and full of promises of better things to come. It wasn't the end of Gabriele's story, just the beginning of a new chapter. One where she wasn't defined by her trauma, but by her strength in overcoming it. One where she wasn't alone, but had someone by her side who saw her for what she really was. And for the first time in 5 years, Gabriele allowed herself to have hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have a future that wasn't stained by fear. A future where she could be happy, where she could love and be loved back, truly. Derek would still have his day in court. There would still be difficult moments ahead. But Gabriele was no longer alone facing them. She had Lucio. She had his team that had become something like a strange family. She had her therapist and Mr. Patterson and all the small pieces of a life she was rebuilding, brick by brick. And most importantly, she had herself. The strong woman who had survived hell and come out the other side, scarred but not broken. Different, yes, but maybe better in ways she was still discovering. As she pulled away from the kiss, looking into Lucio's eyes, and seeing in them a future she barely dared to imagine, Gabriele finally understood something fundamental. Derek hadn't taken everything from her. He had taken years. He had taken her innocence. He had taken her sense of security. But he hadn't taken her ability to love, to trust, to rebuild. Those things were still hers, buried deeply but not destroyed. And now, with time and care, and the right kind of love, she could bring them back to the surface. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for saving me, for seeing me, for waiting." Lucio kissed her forehead gently. "You saved yourself, Gabriele. I just helped remove the obstacle. The strength was always yours." And maybe he was right. Maybe she had always been stronger than she thought. Maybe surviving wasn't just about escaping, but about finding reasons to keep living after, and she had found her reasons. In the bookstore she loved, in the books that comforted her, in the people who cared about her. And now, in this man who had entered her life as a stranger and become something much more. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There was still a lot of work to do, a lot of healing that needed to happen. But for the first time, Gabriele was excited about the future instead of terrified by it. And that, she realized, was her own kind of victory. Derek had tried to break her, control her, and finally destroy her. But she had survived. More than that, she was thriving. And there was no greater revenge than that, living well, despite everything he had done to stop her. So as the sun set over Denver, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Gabriele Morrison allowed herself something she hadn't done in a long time. She allowed herself to be happy. Not perfectly, not without complications or residual fears, but genuinely, deeply happy. And that was more than enough. It was everything. 6 months later, Gabrielle was at the bookstore during a quiet spring afternoon when she received a call from the prosecutor. Derek had accepted a plea deal. 20 years in prison without possibility of parole for the first 10. He would also be required to participate in anger management programs and therapy for domestic abusers, though everyone knew it probably wouldn't make a difference. Some men couldn't be fixed, but at least he would be far away, unable to hurt her or any other woman for a long time. Gabrielle hung up the phone and stood for a moment, processing the information. She expected to feel triumph or relief or something dramatic. Instead, she felt only a quiet calm. It was really over. Derek Foster was no longer a threat, no longer a shadow hanging over her life. He was just a man in a cell, paying for the consequences of his choices. And she was free. Truly, completely free. She picked up the phone again and called Lucio. He answered on the first ring, as he always did when she called. "Hey, everything okay?" "More than okay. The prosecutor just called. Derek accepted a deal. 20 years. There was a moment of silence, then. "How are you feeling?" Gabrielle thought about it. "Free. I feel free." She could hear the smile in his voice when he responded. "Good. You deserve that. Want me to come over? We can celebrate. Actually, I was thinking about something different. Remember when you said there's a place for me on your team if I wanted?" "Yes, the offer still stands. I want to accept. Not immediately, I still love the bookstore and Mr. Patterson needs me. But maybe part-time. I could help Maya with research, or help coordinate with victims who need someone who understands what they're going through. I want to turn what happened to me into something positive. I want to help other people the way you helped me." Lucio was silent for so long that Gabrielle thought the call had dropped. Then, "Are you sure? It's not an easy job. You'll hear difficult stories, see things that will bring memories back." "I know, but I also know I can make a difference. And I need this, Lucio. I need to feel that something good came from all this." "Then welcome to the team. We can start slow. See how you feel. And if it's too much, no judgments, okay?" "Okay. Thank you. For everything. Again. Stop thanking me. We're partners now, in every sense. Partners support each other. It's what we do. Partners." Gabrielle liked how that sounded. Not savior and victim, but equals working together. It was exactly what she needed. In the months that followed, Gabrielle divided her time between the bookstore and Lucio's operation. She discovered she had a talent for talking with abuse victims, for making them feel heard and believed in a way that only someone who had been through it could. She helped coordinate safe houses, plan escape routes, collect evidence that could be used in court. And with each person she helped, she felt the last chains that Derek had placed on her break a little more. Her relationship with Lucio deepened too, growing from something new and fragile to something solid and lasting. They had their challenges, certainly. His work was dangerous, and there were nights when she stayed awake worried, waiting for him to come home safe. And she still had her moments, flashbacks or nightmares that left her shaking and scared. But they worked through it together, with patience and understanding, and the kind of love that didn't demand perfection, just honesty. 1 year after the day Derek was arrested, Lucio took Gabrielle to a special place. It was a small memorial garden he had created in honor of his sister Sophia. There was a bench under a flowering tree, and a simple plaque with her name and dates. "I come here when I need to remember why I do what I do," he said, as they sat together on the bench. "To remember that every person we save is a chance to honor her memory." Gabrielle took his hand. "She would be proud of you, of what you built, of the people you've helped." "I hope so, and I hope she would approve of you. I think you two would have gotten along well." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flowers sway in the breeze. Then Gabriele said, "I was thinking about writing a book, about my experience, about how I survived, about how the system failed and what could be done better. Not with real names, obviously, but just to help other people who are going through what I went through." Lucio turned to look at her, and there was pride in his eyes. "I think that's an amazing idea. You have an important story to tell, and if it helps even one person, it's worth it. Will you help me? With the technical details, the things about the legal system and security?" "Of course. Whatever you need, I'm here." And he was. In the months it took for Gabriele to write the book, Lucio was there, reading drafts, offering suggestions, supporting her through the difficult parts where she had to relive her trauma to put it on paper. The whole team helped, actually. Maya provided technical information about digital security. James helped with research on domestic violence statistics and system failures. Ryan even shared some of his own experiences protecting victims, giving Gabriele a different perspective. When the book was finally published, modestly at first through a small independent publisher, Gabriele didn't expect much. But then something surprising happened. It started gaining traction. Women who had been through similar experiences started sharing, writing reviews, recommending it to others. The book touched a nerve, filling a need for honest stories about survival that didn't romanticize abuse or turn victims into perfect heroines. Gabriele was imperfect in its pages, making mistakes, struggling, sometimes failing, but always getting up again, and people responded to that honesty. Within 6 months, the book was on bestseller lists. Gabriele was invited to speak at conferences, at women's shelters, at police training programs about how to better handle domestic violence victims. She used her growing platform to advocate for changes in the system, for stronger restraining orders, for better officer training, for more resources for victims. And through it all, Lucio was by her side, her biggest supporter, and her safe harbor when everything got too intense. 2 years after the day she met him on that rainy street in Denver, Lucio took her back to that same place. Gabriele hadn't been there since that night, avoiding it as a reminder of one of the worst moments of her life. But now, standing there with Lucio's hand in hers, it didn't seem scary. It seemed like a turning point, the place where her old life ended and a new one began. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. Lucio turned to face her, and there was something nervous in his expression again, like that night so long ago when he confessed his feelings. "Because this is the place where I met you, where everything changed for me, and I wanted it to be the place where I asked this." He knelt down, and Gabriele's heart stopped. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. "Gabriele Morrison, you are the strongest, bravest, and most incredible person I've ever met. You took the worst that life threw at you and turned it into something beautiful. You taught me that it's possible to heal, that it's possible to love again, that it's possible to build something good even from broken foundations. I can't promise that life will be perfect, or that there will never be difficult days. But I can promise that I'll be by your side through all of them, supporting you, loving you, seeing you for what you really are. Will you marry me?" Tears ran down Gabriele's face, but this time they were tears of joy, not pain. She looked at this man who had entered her life as a savior and become her partner, her best friend, her love. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Lucio slid the ring on her finger, then stood up and pulled her into a kiss that was witnessed only by the stars above and the shadows around. And in that moment, in that place that once represented fear and danger, Gabriele felt only love and hope. They married 6 months later in a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded only by the people who mattered most. Maya was the maid of honor, giving a hilarious and moving speech about how she knew from the beginning that they were perfect for each other. Mr. Patterson walked Gabriele down the aisle, since her own father had died years before. And when Lucio and Gabriele exchanged vows, promising to be there for each other through everything life brought, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Their life together wasn't without challenges. Lucio's work was still dangerous, and there were scary moments where Gabriele had to face the possibility of losing him. Her own work advocating for domestic violence victims sometimes drained her emotionally, bringing old memories to the surface. But they faced everything together, supporting each other, growing together instead of apart. They expanded the operation, opening more safe houses, hiring more people, helping more victims. Gabriele's book spawned a sequel, then a series. She became a recognized voice in the movement against domestic violence, using her platform to create real change. And through it all, she never forgot where she came from. Never forgot the dark days when she thought she would never escape, never be happy again. She used those memories not as chains, but as fuel, as reminders of how far she had come and why her work mattered. 5 years after meeting Lucio, Gabriele was on a stage at a national conference on domestic violence, telling her story to a room full of hundreds of people. She spoke about Derek, about the abuse, about the fear, but she also spoke about survival, about healing, about finding strength in unexpected places, and love when she least expected it. And when she finished, the room erupted in applause. But the moment that mattered most to her was when she came down from the stage and found Lucio waiting, pride shining in his eyes. "You are amazing," he said, pulling her into a hug. "You always are." Gabriele pulled back and looked at the man who had changed her life in so many ways. "We're amazing," she corrected. "Together." And that was the truth. Alone, she was strong. But together, they were unstoppable. Together, they were making a difference, one saved life at a time. Together, they had taken something broken and built something beautiful. And if that wasn't a story of hope, Gabriele didn't know what was. She had started as a victim, scared and alone. But she didn't end that way. She ended as a survivor, an advocate, a wife, a woman who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to fight for what she believed in. Derek had tried to define her, control her, break her. But in the end, she defined herself. And the person she chose to be was stronger, braver, and happier than she ever imagined possible. The shadows of the past were still there. They always would be. But they didn't control her anymore. She had learned to live in the light, to embrace the present, to have hope for the future. And that, she finally understood, was what it meant to truly be free. Not the absence of fear or pain, but the choice not to let those things define you. The choice to keep living, keep loving, keep fighting, no matter how hard it got. Gabriele had made that choice, and she would make it again, every day, for the rest of her life, because she was a survivor. And survivors didn't just exist. They thrived, and she was thriving, in ways she never dreamed possible in those dark days when Derek controlled every aspect of her life. She had reclaimed her life, her voice, her future, and nobody, ever again, would take that from her. That was her promise to herself. That was her victory. And it was sweeter than any revenge could be. Because in the end, the best revenge wasn't making Derek suffer. It was living well, loving deeply, and using her story to help others find their way out of the darkness. And that's exactly what she was doing. One day at a time, one person at a time, one story at a time, changing the world, one survivor at a time. And as the sun set on another day, Gabriele Morrison, formerly Foster, now happily married to the love of her life and doing the work she loved, allowed herself a moment of gratitude. Gratitude for having survived. Gratitude for having found Lucio. Gratitude for having transformed her pain into purpose. and gratitude for finally being free. The shadows of the past still whispered sometimes, but they didn't scream anymore. And in the light of the present, surrounded by love and purpose, Gabriele finally found peace. Not perfect, not without scars, but real, lasting, hers. And that was all she ever wanted. To own her own life, her own choices, her own future. Derek hadn't taken that from her. He had tried, but he had failed. And she had won. Not in the dramatic way that movies portrayed, but in the quiet and persistent way that real victories happened. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one step at a time. Until one day she looked back and realized how far she had come, and when she looked forward, she saw only possibilities. And that, finally, was freedom. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, consider becoming a channel member to watch exclusive videos or send a super thanks. Every donation made to the channel will be used for the creation of new stories. Your help makes all the difference, so we can continue bringing quality content to you. Until the next story.